Let's look at graphing the inequality of negative 12 greater than x minus 7. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just think of this as a one or two step equation. That'll be a lot easier for me to start with. So you'll notice what I did was I went ahead and I wrote out negative 12 equals x minus 7. Because I'm just going to treat this as an equal sign until I get to the very end when I go to actually graph it on my number line. So as always, I want to get x by itself. So I need to move everything away from it. So starting with this negative 7, I need to do the opposite. So I'm going to add 7. Those will cross off to form a 0. X equals, do it to one side, I've got to do it to the other, plus 7. Here's where my integer rules come in handy. This is a negative 12 and a positive 7. Different signs subtract. So I take 12 minus 7 and I come up with 5. 12 is larger, so it's going to be a negative 5. So really, what I've ended up now is I'm going to put my sign back down because I didn't multiply or divide by a negative. So my answer will be negative 5 is greater than x. Negative 5 is greater than x. I'm going to go ahead and graph my inequality. So I'm going to go to the negative 5. I'm going to put a circle over it, and notice that this circle is going to be open over my negative 5. And the reason it's open is because there is not a line underneath the greater than or less than sign. Okay? And now that I know that it's over the negative 5, now in this case, the arrow is not going to point the way that it's supposed to go. It's going to point the opposite way. Because for this to be pointing the right direction, my x needs to be in the first location. And it's not. So it's actually going to go the opposite direction, which would be this way right here. Because the x is less than or smaller than the negative 5. Alright, next problem. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think of this right here. Okay, on this next problem right here is going to be b minus 7 is less than negative 12. So go ahead and set up your problem as a one-step equation. And it should look like this right here. X minus 7 equals negative 12. Where my goals are always the same, to get the x by itself and doing the opposite. So I'm going to add 7, add 7. So x equals 5, again, negative 5. Okay, so now I'm going to put my correct symbol in, and that'll be a less than negative 5. I just brought that symbol up because I didn't change it in any way. Okay, so now what's important to notice is that this equation and this equation are actually the same thing. The only difference is the placement of my variable. One of them is placed in front, one of them placed in back, but either way, they are both got the less than, the point. Okay, so they're both smaller than the negative 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my open circle above the negative 5, and then I'm going to be drawing my arrow this way. And the reason my arrow is going that way is because my x is in the first location, so the point is pointing to the direction that the line should go. Now this is another simple one-step equation. I went ahead and I took the liberty of rewriting it down below. But what it says is 32 is greater than or equal to, so it's going to be a closed circle, negative 16p. Okay, so when I rewrote it, there is something special that happens right here. Whenever I multiply or divide by a negative number, it's going to flip the sign. Now I know that this is actually a greater than or equal to sign. I just have it as an equal sign here, so I can just work it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by dividing by a negative 16 because I want my x by itself and I want it positive. So that goes away. Divide by negative 16. 32 divided by 16 is 2. There is 1 positive, 1 negative, so that'll be a negative 2, equals x. Now when I divided by this negative right here and right here, that flipped the sign. So no longer will I have my arrow pointing this way. It's actually going to now flip around and point the other direction. Now it's going to be the same thing as terms of the equal sign. So what I now have is a negative 2 is less than or equal to x. So negative 2 is going to get a filled in circle. Now notice that once again my x isn't in the location to point that way. It's actually going to be the opposite because the x has the mouth. It's got the larger numbers. So it's going to be going this way. Okay. So my answer is negative 2 is less than or equal to x. Negative 2 is less than or equal to x.